Thank you for joining us tonight.
You're welcome. I hadn't seen the X-Files until the day before I interviewed for the job.
Really?
Yeah. So I wasn't a fan. I wasn't not a fan, but it wasn't on my radar. I mean, I knew about it. Obviously, my brother loved it, but he said, "Oh my God, you got to watch it." And then when I got he was not a geek or a nerd or anything like that. But when I got the job on the X-Files, he was very excited. It was pretty funny.
X-Files was known to be in a very dark, wet, tree-filled environment. And then you're now picking up season 6 and it's in LA. Bright, sunny. It's a very different environment. How do you, what were the kind of things that you, as a location manager, faced with these new type of episodes?
Well, they made a conscious decision to sort of reboot the look because, of course, it was a new production designer, Corey Kaplan, and I know you've spoken to her. It was a new location manager, me. It was a new terrain, Los Angeles. So they embraced it. And I don't think it, I mean, I've been asked that question on a number of occasions. And of course, they used the sort of the dark, dank forests of British Columbia very, very effectively. But it's not as if it went from sort of doomy and dark to dazzlingly bright without, in quick succession. So I think the transition was made pretty elegantly by the writers for the sort of locations they were asking for. And we shot a fair bit at night anyway. It was more, ultimately, it was more comfortable for the cast and crew at night than it was in the, pissing with rain in British Columbia forests. And I thought they were very wise in embracing the desert. We built the Anasazi ruins out in the Anza Borrego, and they embraced embraced it very well. What I noticed about what they did when we brought the show to LA was that they chose to set scenes in many more parts of the country and the world than they had done previously in British Columbia. And I remember Michelle McLaren's sister was called her one day from Utah and said, "What the hell? Why did you come to Utah and not tell me you were coming?" And Michelle said, "We didn't come to Utah. We did it all in Southern California." And she went, "Ooh, touche." And we got lots of plaudits from people, which I was very proud of, for cheating Southern California with different parts of the world. We had one episode where there was a scene set in East Africa, I think it was, and we did that at Leo Carrillo Beach, in Malibu. It just goes to show that you can, with a good bit of casting of extras and set dressing, you can fool a lot of people a lot of the time. So fool is possibly an inappropriate word. You can hoodwink skillfully people into thinking that you're in a place that you're not. The magic of the movies.
You're making them not think about it, which is, I think, the ultimate compliment.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's, yeah. And Corey and her team did a great job. I mean, and Tim Stepik with a set decoration. I think my big takeaway from the show, people ask me all the time about it, is what did you derive most from it? And it was the fact that it was working for this amazing family of incredibly creative but nice people. And it was nice that it was great that they chose Bernie Caulfield, and then Michelle gathered together a very nice group of people who put their heads together brilliantly, creatively, to create the artifice of being in different parts of the world. So I was used to work. I mean, I'd already been working in LA quite a bit because my whole career started off there. So it's not as if I thought, "Oh my God, where can I go for this?" I had a good knowledge of LA. So when they asked for Utah, when they asked for New York, when they asked for this, that, and the other, I was able to go quickly to it. And it wasn't just me. I mean, I had a great team in the location department. Matt Gordon, you've spoken to, Michelle Latham. Both of them deserve a huge amount of praise for the scouting work they did in bringing to the screen these places that were supposed to be in other parts of the world, but actually shot in Southern California.
You've had such an impressive career. I was looking over your credentials today. So many awesome movies and projects, but thinking about just the X-Files for a moment, what was it like back then, being part of the phenomenon that was the X-Files?
That's a great question, because it was the first show I'd worked on where there was this rabid fan base. You know, I'd worked on some relatively high-profile projects, but nothing of the caliber of the X-Files, and it prepared me for the craziness that I've encountered since they're working on Transformers and Batman and the Marvel movies, where people live, breathe, and die this stuff. I mean, it's you know, I've often said my career is evidence of a God with a sense of humor, because I'm not into science fiction, cartoons, comic books, action heroes, and that's all I ever work on. But it's been lovely to encounter people who are so, you know, we light up their lives with what we put on the screen, and I love that. I mean, it's hilarious in a way that it's me doing this or being part of the team doing this. But I love it, and you know, I'll whenever you ask about the fans, I'll tell you a great story about some X-Files fans. And so it was kind of weird at first, and I thought, well, because people would say, "What are you working on?" And I would say, "I'm working on the X-Files," and I would say it very matter-of-factly, like I just said it now, and they would virtually pee their pants with excitement, and that happened routinely, you know, and it was great. I'm very proud of having, you know, I feel very honored to have taken part in what is unquestionably, you know, a piece of television history, you know, with no doubt. I mean, it changed the game in terms of, you know, upped the game in terms of the quality of production, the look of the thing, and the quality of the writing. I mean, television had been, you know, when you look back to, you know, American television series, the Dukes of Hazzard and Kojak and Cannon and things like that, and the Charlie's Angels, they were all slightly popcorn, slightly sort of, I don't know what the right word is, but they were insubstantial ultimately in terms of the quality of the writing. It was, you know, it was quite dumb writing. No offense intended, but compared to the X-Files, where Chris Carter and, you know, people who've gone on to these amazing careers like Vince Gilligan wrote high quality, you know, seriously good stuff, referencing Greek mythology and referencing Norse mythology and referencing geopolitical trends and cultures and things like that. And, you know, I'm amazed by, I still maintain that two of the smartest people I've ever met in my life are Chris Carter and David Duchovny. And they were very instrumental in contributing to, obviously, I mean, Chris Carter very central, of course, in contributing to the quality, but Duchovny's cleverness and of course Gillian too. I mean, just great casting, great people, not just great actors, but great thinkers who thought about what they were bringing to the party and using their great gifts very wisely. So I little old me, you know, I come from a small town in Wales, being a small part in this, a cog in this amazing engine is an amazing, and I will, you know, I can retire whenever that happens, hopefully fairly soon, knowing that I took part in and contributed to a part of television history. I'm very proud of that.
I hear that you're also a little famous with the fans. I read a story about an incident in Big Bear.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you tell us a little bit about your experience with the fans and tell us that story or anything else that you think we'd appreciate?
It's a story I tell quite often because I love it so much, and it just happened to be on the X-Files. And it just back to Lauren's question about, you know, what was it like to work on the project. I had no idea how rabid people were, rabid in a benign kind of way, of course, about the show until that night. And we were filming up in Big Bear, which, as you may or may not know, 100 and something miles northeast of LA, up in the mountains. And we'd shut down 2 miles of road so that we could have a crashed spaceship on fire in the middle of the forest. And so it was about 2 o'clock in the morning, and and I didn't spend that much time on set, but because it was a Friday night and there was nothing coming up the next day, I think Mac wanted to go home to San Luis Obispo or something. I sort of volunteered to sort of take the overnight shift, and which, you know, in a rare fit of givingness, I decided to let Matt go home and take the night shift. Anyway, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. And I was sort of doing my rounds, checking to make sure that the roadblock was okay. And I went to check the CHP officers who were at both ends of the closure. And I went up to the one guy and I said, "Hey, you doing all right?" He goes, "Actually, I'm a bit cold. Can I go and get some coffee?" And I said, "Sure, why not?" So he drives off to base camp in his patrol car, leaving me sitting on the hood of my car, staring up at a starry night sky and just sort of admiring the sort of the still and quiet of the night. When all of a sudden this woman walks up the road towards me and she goes, "Excuse me, are you Ilt?" I said, "Oh my God, who are you? Why are you here? And how do you know my name?" And she goes, "Well, you know, I've read about you and I've seen you on television. I saw you on CBS, you know, this morning, and I heard your accent, so I put two and two together and I figured out it was you." I said, "Okay, and why are you here?" And she goes, "Well, we're fans of the first." I said, "What do you mean we?" And she goes, "Well, there's 10 of us, and the rest of them are down the road there." I said, "Oh my God!" And she said, "We're in an X-Files chat room. Remember them?"
Okay.
And we've come from all parts of the world to try and find the filming of X-Files to see if we could come to set. And we all sort of arrived in LA, and then we were disappointed to learn from the permit office that you weren't filming in LA, and we did a bit of detective work, and we found you up here. I said, "Jesus Christ, that is pretty amazing. You should work for the FBI." And so, I said, "Good work, soldier." And I said, "Anyway, nice to meet you." And she goes, "Well, before we go, could we come to set?" I said, "Out of the question. You could qualify in some quarters as stalkers." And she goes, "Oh, no, we're not stalkers." And she said, I said, "No, I'm sorry, it's a closed set because for lots of reasons, you know, we've got the set's on fire. It's you know, I can't tell you what it is, but we have fire and brimstone. So I'm afraid not. I hate to be a meanie, but I'm sorry you can't." And she goes, "Oh, well, okay then. Well, before I go, would you sign an autograph for me?" I said, "Autographs? I don't do autographs. I'm nobody. I'm a backroom boy." And she goes, "Oh, no, you're something to me." And she goes, I said, "Oh, okay." So she had this leather satchel, and inside the satchel was one of those A to Z concertina filing binder things, you know, for your bills, G for gas bill or whatever. So she went to J for Jones, and sure enough, she had every single thing ever written about me anywhere in the world, in newspapers, magazines, or periodicals, whatever it was. And she took out a picture, and there was a picture of me. I went, "Jesus Christ." And then she gave me a Sharpie, and I said, so I wrote, "You guys are freaks, love Ilt." And she thought that was hilarious. So she gives me a hug, and then she goes back down the road, and one by one, all 10 of these women, they're all women, and they were lovely. And there was a doctor from Boston, there was a teacher from North Carolina, there was a university professor from Milan or Rome or something. All very nice. And these were not idiots. These were all educated. I don't know why I said these were not idiots, because as if I'd expect idiots to be there in the middle of the night. But these were not sort of, you know, just sort of people you'd imagine sitting around in their bedroom, sort of, you know, sort of drooling over pictures of David Duchovny. These are women, with nice women with careers from all over the world who'd done this amazing detective work, and they all had their satchels, and I looked at one of their satchels, and you know, on the D for Duchovny, there was about half an inch, of course, because I think there was more on him than anything else, and you know, Gillian had a bunch of stuff as well, and so I signed all their things and sent them on their way, but. And I sat there sort of, and weirdly enough, the cop came back about 2 minutes later. I said, "You'll never guess what just happened." And they were kind of lucky to get me rather than him. So their timing was good, because I knew you'd have just told them to fuck off and, you know, disappear. Yeah. But I felt very privileged to meet them, because it sort of, I felt really pleased that I was, you know, contributing to a part of something that was really dear to them, really a real treasure in their lives. So it was a nice moment which I will never forget. Yeah, no, I was very impressed, and not a little worried that they might sneak around me through the woods with ATVs or something like that and find their way to set. But they were delightful, and I think I mean, I don't know if you can tell just from the few minutes we've been talking, but I'm a pretty down-to-earth person. I mean, there's a reason I'm a location manager, because, you know, as well as doing the sort of the sexy scouting stuff, I don't mind picking up cigarette butts in the parking lot either. And I like the fact, I feel very honored to contribute to something which makes a difference in people's lives. You know, life, especially in this day and age with the pandemic and everything, you know, people have sought solace in, you know, Netflix, as I did. And I wouldn't call it seeking solace, it filled in time. But, you know, people love this stuff. And I find it fascinating, and it's a sort of a lovely aspect of human nature that people can escape into something fantastical, and I'm glad to be part of it.
From the time that you were on set, in addition to your mountain story, can you share with us some of the memories that you might have with the cast and crew?
One of my favorite memories, I think, was the finale, when we were down in the Anza Borrego desert, and we'd spent, you know, $1 million building these Anasazi ruins to make them seem like they were in New Mexico, and then blew them up. And I just remember everybody, from the lowliest PA to the loftiest producer, was very conscious that we had something coming to an end that was very dear to us and dear to the viewing public as well. And so it was great to be out there in the desert in a profoundly, I mean, I don't know if it's because I'm British, but I find the desert profoundly atmospheric. And of course, we'd found a great area to do this work in the sort of badlands of the Anza Borrego desert. And so, and I just remember day after day, the weather was perfect. It was, I think it was April, May or something like that. So it wasn't too hot. And it was just, I was glad to be alive on so many levels, on a personal level and on a professional level. I think I remember talking to Mac about this, that it caused us to evaluate our lives and what they'd come to, and thinking, well, this is pretty cool. We're out on this sort of amazing historical show, and we're in this beautiful landscape with these lovely people, and we're sort of saying goodbye to something that's been near and dear to us for a number of years, but we're saying goodbye in kind of a fun, spectacular way. And I remember standing up on a bluff with Kim Manners, who directed the sequence, and we had helicopters buzzing around. We had the helicopters that were shooting the things, and then helicopters that were supposedly firing the missiles. So we had camera helicopters and picture helicopters. And it was like Vietnam with these helicopters buzzing around everywhere. And it's always exciting, you know, it brings out the small child in all of us, I think, when there are helicopters in the air and they're zooming around, and then there are rockets going off and things like that. Whoa! I remember sort of being up on the bluff, and just as they set off the charges to blow up the ruins, and thinking, woo-hoo-hoo! And we're all sort of cheering and thinking, wow, that's amazing. So I have very dear memories of all of that work out in the desert. And, you know, I just remember it was fun with every new episode. I just remember I've worked on some shows, I thought, oh God, I can't bear the thought of having to read this crap. But with every new episode that came in, I remember thinking, oh, this is interesting. And I wasn't as taken with the mythology stuff as some other people were. Some of my favorite episodes, even the stuff that while they were in British Columbia, was standalones like Home. You know, obviously everybody talks about that. But my favorite episode that I worked on, which was coincidentally one, you know, I'm a big fan of Vince Gilligan with Breaking Bad and everything, was Jesuette. Do you remember that one?
Yes, of course.
With a genie. Yeah, and I remember pissing myself laughing at some of the lines in that. And that had one of my favorite moments, and one of the things I'm most proud of having pulled off. There was a scene in that where the genie asks David, you know, Mulder, what he'd like as I think it's his first wish. I think, and he said, "I'd like world peace." And then he goes outside, and everybody's gone. It's not wars stopping. It's actually the genie has wiped everybody off the face of the earth. So we did that early one Sunday morning in downtown LA, around the Alexandria Hotel at 5th and Spring. I don't know. Do you know the geography of down LA very well?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, outside the Alexandria Hotel. So we had about 60 cops and about 100 PAs, because we had to shut down. Because so that the camera could swing around and see the quiet earth, we had to stop the traffic and remove the traffic, except for the traffic we put into it. in like 4 or 5 blocks in those directions, 4 or 5 blocks in the perpendicular direction, so that whichever direction the camera looked in, you wouldn't see any signs of life, because if there was any signs of life, it would ruin it. So we did it early in the morning, so there were no pigeons around, there were no homeless things. I don't know if we could pull it off now, because there are so many businesses in that area, and there's so many homeless people in downtown, sadly, that's a whole other conversation. But there were PAs in every doorway for blocks and blocks. There were cops on every intersection for blocks and blocks. And of course, they all had to be back out of the way, so we couldn't see the roadblock. We couldn't see gumballs, we couldn't see people, we couldn't see bikes. And then we did things like we had a picture car, a bus, halfway across the intersection, as if the driver and the passengers suddenly disappeared. And then we had bicycles laying down in the street and briefcases laying everywhere. So the PAs and the SecDec department had to throw these briefcases. And once we held the traffic, they had to throw the bikes out into the street and the briefcases out into the street to make it look like all of a sudden everybody had just vanished. So I loved that. And it was, we did this, we started 4 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday morning, which is pretty barbaric. And so we were ready to shoot by first light. And so I think we shot we only needed about 3 takes, because it was a sort of like a killer, big, wide shot. And so we were done by 9 o'clock in the morning. And I think that we were supposed to give the roads back. We couldn't do that extent of ITC. Do you know ITC, intermittent traffic control?
Yeah.
We weren't allowed to do that until about 9 o'clock in the morning, but we'd got the shot. And it was one of those really complicated things to set up, because we had to count how many cops we'd need for each intersection, for blocks and blocks in each direction. We had to count the doorways, and we had to imagine what might happen, who might come out of where to ruin the shot. Because like I say, all I needed was one person. Well, we could have rotoed them out, but we wanted to do it in camera as best we could. So that's something that I always come back to.
Was it true that a homeless woman did walk into the one shot and then you guys scurried her out? Was that true, or was that a rumor?
I think we certainly had to shoo people out of the shop before we started rolling. I mean, because obviously they checked the first AD. I can't remember. I think maybe Barry Thomas was the first AD on that. So we had the camera guys looked in every direction to make sure it was clean.
The last question that we asked to everybody, and it's become very interesting to see everybody's responses. Hang on, sorry, I just got alert. If you could say something to the fans for the last, however, almost 28 years the show has been around, what would you say?
That's a great question. I think thank you, because of course, without the fans, we are nothing. We have nothing. And I like the fact that the fans got what Chris was trying to achieve. It could easily have fallen on deaf ears or blind eyes, but I like the fact that people took the chance to use their brains. There's so much dumb television, there's so many dumb movies, and the fact that this appeals to a higher intellectual plane, and people rose up and thought about it, and I've read things about people theorizing on the stories and the mythology and stuff like that, and I love that. And I think a simple thank you is, thank you for paying my mortgage for 4 years on the X-Files. Because, like I said, without the fans, you are nothing. It's like the sporting team. I mean, I'm a big soccer fan, and the soccer in England has been very different and not as good without the fans. They are the X factor, no pun intended, which makes it all worthwhile. And nobody has ever come up to me and goes, "Oh, you wanker working on the X-Files, what a shit show." The exact opposite. They said, "Wow, how cool, you're so lucky." And it's kept me humble, because not that I needed to be kept humble, I hasten to add, but it's reminded me how lucky I am. I had no aspirations to get into the film business when I was a kid. There's nobody in my family involved in the arts. I just got lucky, and here I am. And so I just want to say thank you. I mean, I said earlier on, I mean, just the group of people, and it wasn't, because I've worked on shows since then where it's been an impressive group of creative people, but it hasn't felt like family. I mean, obviously the longevity and the fact that they were able to keep that group, most of people, Bill Rowe and Corey and myself, all, for 4 years, talking about the LA stuff, it didn't feel like work. And my mother said to me once, "What's it like working on the X-Files?" I said, "It's like running away and joining the circus." Because it just felt, like the camaraderie and the fact that people would support each other. Because, like anything in life, there are dips and troughs, and people would support each other. And, we knew about each other's lives and families. And that was wonderful, because it didn't feel like going to work. To paraphrase Woody Allen, it was the most fun you can have with your clothes on.